So, Rob, thank you for being on the show with me today. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I am Rob Shavell. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company called Abine, and we have a service called DeleteMe, which removes personal information you don't want out there online from lots and lots of different places, starting with a bunch of data brokers that are out there selling it, listing it on Google, and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So my audience really likes or takes seriously open source intelligence. So kind of go over for everybody what a data broker is and what it does.
Sure. Yeah, I think some technical listeners, but effectively, as we all know, using our cell phones, walking around every day, doing things on the internet, off the internet, a heck of a lot more data is being collected about us today than it was even 5 years ago, and certainly 10 or 15 years ago when the internet was a little bit more do-it-yourself friendly, less billion-dollar companies sucking up every piece of data. And so we throw off a lot of data, and unfortunately, there's a lot of backhanded dealings that go on with that data, whether you sign up for an app or even if you go in some states to the registry of motor vehicles. I mean, everything we do is throwing off data, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's sold behind our back without our knowledge to data brokers. Data brokers can be different kinds of companies, some well-meaning, some not. And they collect data about us from different places and correlate it to our personal information, thereby getting all kinds of profiles built about pretty much everyone in America. So that's what a data broker is. A good example of a couple of them would be whitepages.com, which, as you know, is probably self-explanatory for those in the audience old enough to remember what a phone book was.
Yeah.
And there's others ranging from Spokio to reverse phone number lookup to checker. They just come in all different shapes and sizes. And unfortunately, it's kind of numbing these days to track how many of them are out there, what they have, what they don't have. And that's where DeleteMe can come in and kind of help take care of that for you without creating a lot more headache.
Very cool. And we'll talk more about your process here in a minute. You kind of talked about, all these companies are now jumping in on the internet. Our personal data, it's a law of supply and demand. So there's a huge supply of data brokers out there. So who exactly is buying all of this information? I know we as individuals can go and look one person up, but they can't make money just off of like one individual going. There has to be people buying this data in mass, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So surprisingly, some of the data brokers make a lot of money selling to individuals. And that can, we go online, we search for somebody's name. It's interesting, about 10 to 12% of all Google searches, of which there are trillions every month, are for people's names. And I think when you reflect on that, it's because we're still humans, we're still social animals, and we're always either looking for information on somebody we met or Googling somebody that from a business meeting, or potentially even Googling ourselves. And so when those name searches come up, a lot of times these data brokers have list the ability to go find anybody on their websites and in fact start divulging a little bit of their profile information on you if they think the search is you. And so from an open source intelligence standpoint, one of the problems is it's become very, very easy for the average person to just key in a name and a city in Google and drill down to get a full profile. And if they have, anywhere from 99 cents to $20, they can start buying, all of the details: cell phone number, kids' names and ages, vehicle information, snapshots of your home and the street you live on, and connect all these things in a very, very easy way, which is I saw in one of your, your prior podcasts, you covered this sort of follow me home kind of security situation and things like that. All these things are just too easy if somebody out there has purposes, that are not exactly, let's just say above board
Right.
for lots of, as we know, for lots of reasons, there are individuals that just don't have your best interest at heart, which is probably why we're on the phone. But anyway, to loop all the way back to your question, some of these guys like Spokio and others have a huge business, $100 million plus, just selling this information, by the way, which we never gave them. A, we never gave them permission explicitly to do, and B, they're not sharing any of the profits with anyone last time I checked. But they have a substantial business just selling retail, selling to consumers. But your question was, well, they can't make that much money on that. Who else do they sell to? They do make some money on that, as I just said, but they also sell to other businesses, and they sell to other businesses that want marketing lists for legitimate things. They sell to political action committees, which has its own issues these days in America. They sell to other websites like dating sites where they do sort of very limited or cheap background checks on people to make sure that somebody who's signing up or registering is who they say they are. If you've ever answered one of those questions when you're going to create an account where, which past address did you live on? Was it this street, that street? They create questions out of those. So there are, and all the data brokers obviously will talk about the use cases or the ways that they sell information that seem to be the most legitimate, because they're marketing themselves and they want to put their best foot forward. But the reality is, as you said, it's a market, it's economics, it's supply and demand. And our belief is that most of these data brokers will sell all of your data to anyone. Doesn't matter if it's Chinese government, doesn't matter if it's the Russians, doesn't matter if it's some hackers looking to do robocalls, to everybody in the United States. We don't believe they give a damn.
Yeah, and I agree. And in all of this stuff that you're saying, and all the stuff that we're talking about here, I know my listeners are sitting here thinking, is this legal? I mean, is there any way that this is legal? And I think it probably, unfortunately, is. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's exactly what I'd be thinking. And sometimes I wake up and I go, why are we with DeleteMe even in business? We really shouldn't be in business if the world functioned with a degree of fairness. That said, it is mainly legal, but not completely legal. And so breaking that down, there's a concept of most people have heard First Amendment and sort of the rights to free speech, and underneath that somewhere is a concept of a public record, which was created, I think, many, many years ago, originally in England before we even came over to America, which was really around taxes. And if you pay your taxes, you need to do that in public, and the government has a right to, and other citizens have a right to see that record. And anyway, that evolved. I'm not, as you can probably tell, didn't get A's in high school, but that's why I became an entrepreneur.
There you go, man.
There's no other option. There's no other employment option for me. But anyway, there's a long history of what's called public record information, and that has to do sometimes with your government identification and some information linked to that and where you live and things like that. And so in the US today, those data brokers have a legal right to be able to collect public record information. What they don't have a right to do, and where it becomes more of a gray area, is connect all that information to all this other information that they're scraping from networks, vehicle data, snapshots of your house, collecting it on individuals in your family or so on that have specific jobs, like, for example, if you're in police or you're a first responder or you're a judge, there's certain protected groups of individuals that could be threatened from this information being out there, and new laws being passed. And also laws are being passed on a state by state basis, including California, and there's stuff happening in Maine, stuff happening in Virginia, and others. And those laws are enabling residents of those states to say, hey, some of what you're doing at least is illegal, and I want you to take it down.
Very cool.
Sorry for the long answer, but it's just not, like a lot of the law, it's just not quite as black and white as we think it should be. Because whether or not, my belief is whether, legal or not, in the internet age, we should have the right, citizens should have the right to say how our information is being used, and see what information any third party has about us. And I think the good news about the law is that all, both on a state by state basis in the United States, hopefully federally soon, and all across the world, not just in Europe, but Brazil and even in China, of all places, laws are starting to get passed, giving consumers, citizens, some of these rights. And so I think the good news for people is it is highly likely, in my opinion, that you will have more rights over your data in a couple of years, no matter what state you live in, no matter what country you live in, than you do today.
Very good. And, that makes sense. As you said, 10, 15 years ago, people were not collecting this amount of data. It makes sense now that we're going to start to see privacy become a bigger issue in politics. So yeah, I agree. I think that's fantastic. So I am personally a member of DeleteMe, which is your product, and I absolutely love it. Give us an overview of what DeleteMe does.
Sure. I think one of the reasons you and others like it is we keep it pretty simple. So it's pretty easy to describe what it is. And by the way, so you go to our website, which is joindeleteme.com, because unfortunately I can't buy the deleteme.com domain from somebody who's squatting on it. So you go to joindeleteme.com and you sign up online, just like you would for any service you buy. You give us in a couple different screens of forms. It should take about 5 minutes. A bunch of the information you want us to go find that you think might be out there about you, and that can include not just your full name and your current address, but your past addresses, old cell phone numbers, aliases you might have used, old email addresses, stuff that you generally just don't want out there, and you want to make sure, if it's out there, it gets cleaned up or removed or redacted or what have you. And so once you do that, you hit submit, and then the rest is up to us. It really is a service, and we try to keep it real simple that way. We don't make you do a whole lot more than that. So what happens is, once we get that information, our privacy advisors, usually within a week, will go out, search all these different data broker websites and databases, go out and find what information you all gave us, our customers gave us, that is out there for sale, listed on Google, et cetera, and we create and then we opt you out of all of those databases, which can take different amounts of time for them to go, respond to, which is a whole nother issue. But generally speaking, we get your report back in a week or so that gives you a very clear, and that report gets emailed to you. If you don't want to log back into our fancy dashboard, you don't have to. It's up to you. And it's very clear, because I personally hate these services that try to, make it confusing, tell you that there's, and you mentioned this on your website, which is like keeping it simple is important. You're not trying to scare your audience. You're not trying to use a whole lot of tactics to get them to overreact to things. And neither are we. Try to keep it very simple. Here's where we found your information. Here's which data brokers had it. Here's exactly what they had on you. These guys had your cell phone, and these other guys had your mother's maiden name, and this, that, and the other thing. And you just see it all. It's very clear. And then over the next month or so, as these data brokers respond to the opt-out request that we send, that information starts to come down. And it's not perfect. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of data brokers that we cover, and we're always adding more throughout the year. Sometimes these guys go out of business and they sell, then they come out with a new name, so it's kind of whack-a-mole. But eventually, a significant amount of that PII, that personally identifiable information out there about you that you may not want exposed as easily in these databases and on Google, comes down. And that's where the process begins. And again, you don't have to do anything as a customer. You just get your report. And then 3 months later, we go do the whole thing again. We go back and recheck everything because they'll get more data on you. They'll buy more stuff. And so over time, unfortunately, your information will repopulate on a certain percentage of these data broker sites unless you do an extremely thorough job of keeping your any new information going out to any other places hidden. And that's why we have this other product that we created called Blur, which helps you never give out your information in the first place by using alias email addresses and phone numbers and credit cards and things like that. But that's more of a process. I mean, you have to be kind of a dedicated kind of personality to do that. We think it's great, but one of the easier ways to handle the problem of this information getting out there is to just sign up, and again, we take care of it for you. Our privacy advisors take care of it for you all year as a service for one subscription price, which we haven't changed in a few years, even though everyone's telling us inflation is an all-time high. It's $129 a year for a person. We think it's a pretty reasonable value. But I must say, for those listeners and anyone who is a little cash strapped and hard up, we do have on our main website what we call our DIY guides, and those guides we keep updated. We invest in them, and we actually break down in a step-by-step process exactly what our privacy advisors do on each of these sites. So if you want to do it yourself, you can just head right to our site and start opting yourself out of some of these things for free.
Right. And that was one of the things that really impressed me when I was checking you guys out as a company was you're like, hey, here's all the steps. Here's all the steps that you need to opt out of all of these data brokers. Feel free, go knock yourself out because we want you to make sure that your data is safe. And I appreciated that. And as I started going through that guide, I started looking at all of the hurdles you have to jump through because they're not the same. They require different information. Sometimes you have to submit like a driver's license or something like that, or something to really prove who you are. And I remember you talked about white pages earlier in this episode. One of the first sites that y'all deleted me from was white pages. And then like a year later, you deleted me from them again. And it hit me. They're buying more information. When I buy things and when I do things, my information is going back out to data brokers. So one of the things that I like about DeleteMe is I feel like you guys have my back in the fact that, yeah, I can opt out myself once manually, but you guys are going back and checking because unfortunately, this seems to be a never ending cycle.
Yeah, it's a real pain in the what. And, honestly, we exist and we're growing. And, thankfully, the average customer sat rating is 4.8. I think just because it is a pain, and we've just gotten good. We've been in business for 10 years now. We've gotten quite efficient and effective at doing this on behalf of people and just being relentless about it, because it is just in the modern world, it's just a constant fight.
Yeah, you're right. So I know other people who are listening to the show right now are thinking, okay, well, you can take away data broker information, but can you delete my government records from the internet as well? I'm sure you've gotten that question before.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten, I don't think there's a question we haven't gotten, like 10 years in business and hundreds of, I think we've done 30 million deletions by now. So
Wow.
we've handled every question you can imagine. And unfortunately, generally the answer is there's a lot that you can't delete from the internet. And for those people that are a little confused, some of them come to us and say, hey, can you just delete whatever I want off of the internet and off of this newspaper and this arrest record or this other kind of thing. In general, we have to say no a lot and we have to be honest about it. But so no, you can't just delete, your name from government registries, and you can't become completely anonymous for $100. I'm here to deliver that bad news.
Yeah.
And that said, let's talk about arrest records for a second, because it's a good example of government information. We have a bunch of people, customers that have gotten either been arrested and falsely accused or been exonerated, and yet the local newspaper or some of these data brokers that specialize in hoovering up data from the police have gotten a hold of that. And when you Google them and so on and so forth, they're still front and center, even though they've been declared innocent. And there are things that those kinds of folks can do, and we can help, not necessarily help with every step of the process, but we can help point them to the right resources, the right people in their state, in their town, and we can give them templates on how to do these kinds of things effectively. And we are investing heavily in building out the team to handle those custom requests and help people with pretty much any request. Even if it seems unreasonable, there's my belief is there's a reason why somebody's making that request. And, we should do our best to help them, whether it's understanding what's possible and what's not, or understanding if they want to take it forwards and really get serious about hiring a lawyer or finding somebody to, help them. We try to do that stuff as well, because we're not just here to do one thing. We're here to sort of be the advocate for any kind of privacy or data request that anybody has, whether they're an individual, a family, a dad, or an employee in a corporation.
Very cool. And I think to your point also, with a lot of property records and things like that, that's all online from the government. Going back to your whole First Amendment talk at the beginning of this show, you legally can't delete that stuff from the internet. That goes against a bunch of different laws. So I think for a lot of people who might think that you can just, completely delete somebody from government records, that's not legal for you guys to do, correct?
Not legal for anybody to do.
Right. Right.
Again, there are ways to sort of obfuscate when you purchase a house and things like that by creating a company that doesn't have your name on it. This kind of other this and that kind of other stuff. Like I said, we try to help educate our customers on any request they have, but no, you can't just go delete government records that you don't like, unfortunately.
Yeah. The FBI is going to knock on your door if that happens. That's not what you want to do. So you mentioned your other product, Blur, earlier in the show. Tell us what that does.
Yeah, so Blur is if you've ever been on your internet browser, Chrome or what have you, and you had a password saved and filled in for you. Blur started off as a password manager, but instead of being just a password manager, it was a privacy-focused password manager in the sense that when you clicked into a form online or on your phone or what have you, and it asked for not just a new password, but asked for your email address, we'd give you the ability to create a new email address that was linked to your private, personal email address, and a new phone number that could route calls, forward calls to your cell phone instead of you giving them your cell phone. Same thing with your credit card. Create a new virtual credit card for, say, a fixed amount of money, like $100, almost like a gift card that you could use online to buy something without giving that store your actual real credit card. And by doing all those things, you're actually trying to, our Blur users are, especially combined with DeleteMe, are trying to fix the problem at the root cause level, right? You're first cleaning up all that data, letting DeleteMe clean up all that data about you. And then you're trying to be smart about not giving out that data.
Right. Yeah, and that works. So it looks like you guys are attacking the problem for two different directions. So does Blur do anything to help stop like these third-party trackers? And if so, can you kind of give us an overview of what we just did third-party tracker? Oh, that's bad. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so third-party trackers and ad blockers have sort of merged in some ways in VPNs as well. All sort of do different shades of the same thing, which is the trackers and advertisers use little. People used to refer to these things more as cookies, and now they're less cookies. They're more trackers, and what they do is they send information when you visit another site back to, say, Google or back to, say, Facebook, and it says, hey, this person with this IP address, went to this page on this site at this time with this browser, and they use that for delivering, billions and billions of advertisements every second. Except there's a lot more of these trackers and ad and behavior trackers and ad trackers than there used to be. There's hundreds of them, and they can track you across the web. And so by Blur, when you install it into your browser, blocks those. Also, ad blockers typically block the majority of those as well. So it's just a good practice in general if you don't want information about your web browsing, which is then correlated to information they bought from the data brokers that we've already discussed, which is then put into an even more detailed profile about everything you're doing online and offline. We don't want to go too deep into it probably today because it's probably out of scope. But let me just say that just like when we started this conversation, we are generating a ton of data, a ton, and every year it is getting digitized and correlated and routed around to different people behind our backs, different third parties, in a more advanced using a more advanced set of methods. And unfortunately, that's what technology does. If you don't regulate it, it gets cheaper and better. And that's what we've seen over the last 4 years, 5 years, is like we have data on this that shows when we were doing DeleteMe reports 4 years ago, the average amount of PI we found on a member, a customer, was something like 600 or 700 different data points across all of these data brokers. 600 or 700 different pieces of your personal information were out there across all these different data brokers. It is now over 2,500, and so it's just a symptom of what's happening, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be slowing down.
Right. Yeah. And, one thing before we wrap up here, one of the things I always tell my listeners, to especially tell their kids, and I think it applies to all of us, is that whatever you put out on the internet is not going away. It's always going to be there. So all of this data, all this stuff that we're clicking across the web, we go buy a birthday present for somebody, that information stays out there. It never goes away, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some senses that's true. And, I'm a dad as well. And I think about, hey, what are my, what's my kid doing? And, how do I want to, make sure that, my family's protected, and, there's not a ton of data out there that, we don't want out there, but we don't want to keep, we don't want to, go off the grid. We're reasonable people living, normal lives, and kids need to, interact with other kids and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard, I think, as a parent and as a dad, it's hard to kind of know where the lines need to be drawn and the boundaries are. But in general, less is more.
Yeah, Agreed. In general, less is more. Rob, man, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. If anybody here is interested in your services, where can they find you?
Join DeleteMe.com. Free guide if you want to take a look or sign up. We'd love to have you as a customer and your family.
Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you, bud.
Thanks for having me.